Hi, welcome. My name is Bill Lee, and this is a presentation of my second paper. Let's get right into it. So the paper that I have chosen was an ontological architecture for principled and automated system of systems composition, with the authors Abdessalam, Elhabbash, Vatsala Nundloll, Yehia Elkhatib, Gordon S. Blair, and Vicent Sanz Marco. The venue and year is the International Symposium on Software Engineers for Adaptive and Self-Managing Systems, SEAMS 2020. So, one thing I want to clear, that I really had to look into to really understand what was going on about this paper was what a system of system entailed and encompasses. Right, let's go on to the next slide. Right. So the problem in this paper concerns systems of systems and basically how it's managed. So the problem currently is that as systems of systems expand, e.g., more systems are being either being changed or added into the larger system, that the environmental complexities introduced really greatly increases the complexity of the overall system, and that's quite difficult to manage and scale. So here I presented a diagram of an example of in the transport sector of a system of systems where each system, traffic condition, crowdsourcing, logistic platform, these all exist as their own independent systems, but in some degrees they in some areas they depend on each other to function, and they need to know and interact with each other. And so as that expands or more systems are added into this little kind of logistical system here, it increases in complexity, and existing architectures which used to describe these systems are not self-adaptive, and this paper kind of proposes a way in which it's possible to abstract away some of the systems in order to create a system of system that is, able to react to change effectively. So the key points about the solution is that they provide a general ontology-based approach to describe distributed systems. So the collection of systems and how they relate to each other is basically described in their kind of architecture that they have proposed. And they also, so as I mentioned before, there's abstraction between the systems within that system of systems, and this is really important because that kind of abstraction needs to exist in order to for there to be reasoning between the systems at runtime. And so what at the same time, the level of abstraction is important because in current cases, systems, as they need to be changed, developers need to go in and these developers need to understand the systems that need to be changed, and then coincidentally implement changes reactively to how the environment has affected or required that system to change. It sounds really repetitive. And so that's a big problem because that's all manual, right? And so the key takeaway is they want to provide a kind of architectural framework that that kind of automates things in a way. So let's talk about what already exists. So the paper mentions that there's already something called a service-orientated architecture, and there's been work that's been done on this for the last 20 years or so, and it's quite broadly used and recognized work. And they mentioned that a service-oriented architecture isn't really good for the use case of what this paper is trying to, the solution that the paper is trying to solve. Hence why they can't extend a service-oriented architecture to be automated for the purposes of a system of systems, and these are the key reasons why, which is that a service-oriented architecture cannot capture the physical system context. Those are the physical system properties, which is kind of required. And so later on, the paper in their solution introduces something called Holons, what I'll talk about later. Secondly, SOA services must be published in a consultable repo. This means that the services or systems should be published in a repository where people can basically consult, or basically code can refer to or reference and manipulate or change. However, this is not always the case for every single system, and so that's another thing that is kind of holding this kind of existing architecture back. Thirdly, developers are required to know and invest significant time in learning about the individual systems that compose that system or system, and that's definitely a problem, because a lot of systems require definitely a lot of time to really understand how to change it and how to develop it to react to change for that individual system, and that's not even concerning about how they relate to each other in the larger system of systems. Right. So the solution architecture that the paper has kind of proposed is they've introduced a new concept called Holons, and these Holons not only encapsulate a system, they also encapsulate several extra additional properties about that system. And so that's the physical service properties, service identifiers, service quality, environmental properties, etc. Basically, they list a whole bunch of things, and I'm pretty sure the list of extra stuff that you can kind of put into what a Holon encapsulates is endless. However, here I've included a diagram taken from the paper itself, which kind of compares how a Holon would be specified or described at each level, at the vendor, developer, and system level, versus a classical approach. So here we have a Holon specification equating to API specification, Holon deployment to application deployment, Holon service to system or service running. Yeah. So here's a case study showing a autonomic smart home, and here we can see full use of how they've applied Holons in their proposed architecture. And so in the first figure we have a smart home controller. This is kind of like a centralized controller for the system of systems. And then figure 2 is, all these figures come from the paper itself, and figure 2 is basically these device ontologies, which do appear to be represent systems within the system itself. And then figure 3 is sample workflow of basically systems feeding into other systems, and basically passing on values, and other systems taking the appropriate actions with respect to those values themselves. Right. So the case study didn't really show anything conclusive, but rather just presented like a scenario and how it would be used. In actuality, how they kind of evaluated how their system would perform, the architecture would perform, was through an evaluation, and they didn't mention it. However, they appeared to be using something called Mesosaurus, which, when I looked into, worked with Apache Mesos clusters, which seem to create and simulate load on servers or CPUs. And here they've shown a diagram of basically a default configuration that they've written scripts for, simulating load, and then their automatic configuration that they've done using that they've created using their Holons, and how that's performed measured against the other one. which appears to do quite well. However, I'm still quite skeptical until I have some more information on really how applicable this is and if the information is biased or not, which I can't weigh from the information in the paper itself. So the paper really emphasizes concluding on the idea of holons, holons. This is their self-described definition of a system, which kind of encapsulates a lot more things. And by using this definition and implementing it, they hope to be able to further construct a system of systems which is automated and adaptive in the future. And they want to basically kind of abstract things away and to a point where you don't actually need developers who have intricate knowledge about individual systems in order to create a system of systems that is automated and adaptive. So this is basically the first step in a contribution basically to this field of research. Yeah, and I personally agree. I think it's a kind of interesting idea. That was quite a good read.